Hello, and welcome back to Stories Sustain Us, where we share the remarkable journeys of individuals dedicated to making the world a better place. I'm your host, Stephen Shower, and today's episode is a powerful reminder of the beauty and strength that come from embracing our cultural differences. Joining me today is Kassandra Ayala-Najera, a first-generation Mexican-Canadian who grew up in a small town with limited diversity. Despite the challenges she faced, Kassandra found her path through education, which became the foundation of her personal and professional growth. Her passion for teaching languages and promoting multiculturalism led her to create Learn Conmigo, a language learning platform that encourages openness and understanding. In today's conversation, Kassandra shares how her rich multicultural background has shaped her mission to break down barriers and reduce hate through knowledge. She advocates for the power of cultural exchanges and the importance of being true to yourself in a world that often tries to define who you should be. Plus, you'll learn about her initiative, Embracing Culture, and she'll give us a sneak peek into her upcoming magazine, which aims to highlight diverse perspectives from around the world. Let me tell you a little bit more about Kassandra Ayala-Najera before we jump into the interview. Kassandra is a multilingual, multiculturalism educator, communication specialist, speaker, and author. She created Embracing Culture, a global initiative that allows people from around the world to share their experiences with multiculturalism and its intersection with all the other aspects of their life. She also created Learn Conmigo, a personalized teaching and tutoring program for non-native Spanish speakers worldwide. Kassandra has a master's in education with a specialization in teaching and learning, a master of arts in Spanish, as well as a background in communications. She has a passion for teaching, learning, and helping others, and she would love for people to embrace their multiculturalism, their multilingualism, and their diversity. This is an episode filled with inspiration, wisdom, and a celebration of identity. So stay tuned for an insightful discussion with Kassandra Ayala-Najera here on Stories Sustain Us, where we are inspiring action through the power of storytelling. Kassandra, welcome. How are you doing this morning?
I'm great. It's raining here, but I'm great.
Yeah, well, thank you so much for joining me on Stories Sustain Us. Where's here? Where is it raining? Because it's raining here in Seattle this morning as well.
I'm close to Ottawa, so it's raining here in Canada, yeah.
Nice. We're kind of in this probably similar type of environment, so just different sides of the continent. So, well, thank you so much for taking time to join me this morning. I appreciate the opportunity to get to know you and speak with you, and how we kind of met through that Changemakers Alliance that we're both connected to. So thank you again for your time this morning.
Thank you for inviting me. It's great. At least kind of I can share my passions and stuff like that.
Wonderful. Well, you kind of know how the show goes. We're going to start out with learning about you. Before we jump into your passions, let's learn about the life of Kassandra. What was childhood like, and how'd you get to be the person you are today?
So I'm first generation Mexican Canadian. My parents are Mexican, but I'm born in Canada in the side of Quebec. So I speak French because of that. I moved to Ottawa when I was 20. I didn't speak a word of English, so I moved in with a massive challenge. I did a communications degree in English.
Wow.
And after that, I did a master's in Spanish and a master's in education and teaching and learning. So basically, my childhood was in Quebec. So I spent pretty much the first 20 years of my life there. It was different because obviously I'm from a small town, so small town French. So it was a bit the difference when it comes to culture-wise. And after that, I moved to Ottawa, which is a different culture because it's English culture.
Yeah.
It was interesting to have that transition between the three of them. Now, on a daily basis, I speak English, Spanish, and French because my parents are Spanish. My friends are mostly English and French. So it's a bit of everything in my life.
Yeah.
So it's interesting to have that transition. Everyone is different when it comes to Quebec culture. It's more closer to the Latin culture. The English culture is different. So it's interesting to have that on a daily basis. Yeah.
Yeah. So what part of Mexico is your family and heritage from?
From Acapulco.
Acapulco, okay. So that's on the western side of Mexico, on the Pacific side. So, how did your parents get from Acapulco to Canada? That's a big jump.
It's an interesting story. My dad was around 18. He met a family from Quebec
Hmm.
at hotels because my dad used to work in hotels in restoration. So he was there and he met them, and the family said, "You know what? You can come in anytime to visit us." My dad took it really seriously,
Yeah.
so he showed up to here and said, "I'm here." So he showed up here, and they actually adopted him as a son.
Oh
So
wow.
he's been there since 18. He met my mom maybe 4 years after in Mexico because my dad used to do 6 months there, 6 months
Come
here.
back and forth, sure.
And yeah, basically they fell in love. And my dad said to my mom, "You know what? Why don't you come to Canada?" My mom was kind of, "Sure, why not?" She didn't really think about the aspect of moving out of the country. She said,
Sure.
"Why not?" So she moved in. And then right after I actually was born, so not long after she moved in here. So it was an interesting story because I don't think my mom expected to have that much change culturally speaking. She was
Sure.
not really aware of the differences in the language barriers and stuff like that. So when she came in, she had a bit of struggle to learn French, obviously, because she was not surrounded by it.
Sure. Sure.
Um, so she went to school, and my dad used, yeah. So after that, I was born 2 years after my brother was born. So yeah, it's an interesting story because I don't think people expect to have that kind of story. But yeah, my dad got adopted by a family here. So he lived pretty much a part of his teenage years and adulthood with them. And
Yeah.
after that was born.
So your childhood growing up there, I'm assuming, correct me if I'm wrong, obviously, but I'm assuming there was Spanish speaking in the home
Yeah.
and French speaking in school as you were growing up. So I think so that's how I'm assuming you kind of were absorbed into both languages at that point.
Exactly. So basically, got my parents at home where I was Spanish. Our friends here, it was French. School was French. It was a bit of struggle when it comes to learning the language when I was younger because I could Spanish and French are extremely similar when it comes to the roots. So I was
Sure, sure.
mixing both languages in the same word.
Mm,
So most of my profs didn't really get what I was saying when I was younger until I was maybe 6. I kind of did the transition. This is French. This is Spanish. This is
sure,
who I need to speak Spanish to, and this is who I need to speak French to. So I was pretty much 6. I was older when I got to kind of, this is what it is.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
And yeah, so I still have a bit of struggle when it comes to pronunciation wise, even more with the R's. I cannot pronounce the R's for God's sakes properly in Spanish because of French. I still have that struggle. But except for that, kind of, I speak fluently Spanish. I actually teach Spanish too on the side hustle.
Yeah,
Yeah, it's interesting kind of how sometimes the language that we have as a background has a huge impact on the rest of the languages. Um,
sure.
so when I speak English, I have also an accent. I'm not sure if it's a French accent or Spanish or it's a mix of both. I'm not aware of it. But at this point, it's just this is who I am. So I'm not going to,
Yeah.
yeah.
So what was, childhood like growing up for you? Were there, any barriers that you had to cross because of the different, besides kind of the mixing of the languages that you just talked about? Were there any other challenges or opportunities that came to you as you were growing up in Quebec?
So there was a lot of challenges because I'm from a small town. So there was no immigrants here. We
Mm,
were the only ones here.
wow, wow.
So culturally speaking, I wasn't accepted in some ways at school.
Mm,
Um,
mm,
as you know, kids are mean sometimes.
mm-hmm.
So it
Yeah,
was a bit
yeah.
of struggle when it comes to that. I didn't really feel
I'm
like
sorry.
I belong. I still
Yeah.
feel like I still don't belong here. But
Mm,
it's still kind of, I think, in a way, it was hard, but it made me stronger in some ways. I think I realized how much a benefit it was to speak different languages and have those cultural mixed in my life.
yeah,
Um,
absolutely.
and I'm actually happy I went through those phases because it made me realize how much stronger I am now because of it.
Yeah, yeah. Well, equally sorry that you had to have those challenging experiences, but I appreciate how you've come out through the other side, a stronger person because of it. I mean, that's a testament to your character and your undoubtedly your upbringing with your family and everything. But I myself a little bit. I grew up in San Antonio. I was born in Wisconsin, but we moved to San Antonio when I was first grade. Young, 6, 7 years old. And San Antonio is a minority majority community. It's 60+% of Hispanic background, largely Mexican descent.
Yeah.
So learning, not to the extent at all that I think it sounds like you did, but certainly having that mixing of cultures is something at a young age that I can appreciate is both beneficial, but also can have challenges with it as far as fitting in and belonging. So I appreciate that aspect of your story, and it's those are some of the challenges that us humans do to each other.
Yeah.
For whatever reason, so so you left Quebec following to go into college. Is that when you were 20? You were is that because I think that's when you said you moved on to Ottawa when
Yeah.
you were 20?
So basically, the
How did
Quebec
that
system.
decision come about, leaving Quebec for Ottawa?
So the Quebec system is done in a way that you have high school, you finish around 17, 18, and after that you do CEGEP, which is a college, 2 years, and after that you go to university.
Mm-hmm.
So I knew since I was actually young that I wanted to go internationally speaking, and I moved to Montreal. When I was 17 to 20. And I think it was a sense of relief when I was there because it was multicultural. Montreal is a multicultural city.
Sure.
And I knew I wanted to be out, international speaking. In order to do that, I needed to learn English. So instead of staying in Montreal, because I could have gone to Concordia or McGill universities, I knew I was going to go back to always the easy language for me. It was French. So I moved out to Ottawa because I knew I didn't have an option to speak English no matter what.
Right, sure.
So that's the reason,
The
mainly
learning
the
by
reason
immersion.
I moved to Ottawa, because I knew I had no option of speaking the language, because if not, I'm not able to manage everything.
Yeah.
So that's the main reason I moved out to Ottawa. And also I knew University of Ottawa is bilingual. So if I had to, I could have gone into a French program. But I decided to just go into English. It was easier. Not easier, but I mean, in order to learn the language, that was the best way to do it.
Sure. To accomplish your goal of learning English, you just immersed yourself in it.
Exactly.
So, yeah. So, so what was that process like for you? Because, I think it's generally easier to learn languages as a younger child. Our brains are more, spongy and so what was, as a nearly fully formed adult, learning a third language, which is in many ways dramatically different from French or Spanish. How was that experience for you?
It was extremely hard. Don't get me wrong. For
Sure.
the first 2 years and a half, I didn't really have any friends. I was not able to communicate properly. And actually, I think I was extremely shy to speak. So I think the main reasons why I was struggling so much at the beginning was because I was shy. I didn't feel like I was able to proper formulate sentences at the beginning. But in a way, people struggle much more. I think the fact that I spoke 2 languages already, it was easier to learn a third language in that sense, because I knew where to start from. It was a transition, even more when I do. I used to not wanting to do presentations because of the language. But after a while, I think you realize that no matter what matters at the end of the day is you get understood. So I started to be less shy, and after the 2 years and a half, I was able to just have friends and feel more comfortable with my language and my skills and stuff like that. And yeah, so it was a hard transition, don't get me wrong.
Sure.
But I don't regret my decision of going there. Yeah.
And you got your master's in what again during that period?
So after I finished my communications degree, I did a master's in Spanish,
Okay,
specialized in linguistics. And after that, I did a master's of education, specialized in teaching and learning.
fantastic.
Yeah.
So what time period was all our early to mid 20s was where you were accomplishing all of that?
So I finished my undergrad. I was 24.
Yeah.
My master's in Spanish, 25, and my master's in teaching and learning at 28.
Yeah. That's a impressive accomplishment of stretches through there. So congratulations there.
Thank
That's
you.
a
I think it
you,
was
you
for
were
me.
busy.
Yeah, it was busy, but I think for me it was most kind of. I knew if I stopped schooling, I wouldn't never go back. So I'd rather just finish early, so I don't
Yeah.
have to go back and think, you know what, I should have done it. Maybe I should go back, but now it's done. I don't have to think about schooling anymore. Yeah,
Yeah.
everyone has a different path and decisions to make. For me, it was just kind of, you know what, let's just do it and just be done with it. I don't have to think about it anymore. But
Yeah.
the Masters of Teaching and Learning I decided to do during the pandemic, which was beneficial in my case because I could do everything online. It
Sure,
was
sure.
easier than me traveling back and forth.
Yeah.
So in a way, I used my time properly and kind of in a way so I didn't have any distraction at that point. We were not able to go up, so it's got my brain was kind of okay.
Right.
Let's do school instead.
Yeah. To stay focused on
Yeah.
the thing at hand, right? Because we're all in lockdown. So
Mhm.
yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's understandable. So I think looking at your resume and LinkedIn profile, you're still associated with the university at Ottawa at this point. Is that correct?
Yeah, exactly. So I've been working at university in administration for the last 5 years, 6 years around that. At the beginning, I actually was a TA, so I used to teach Spanish, beginner Spanish at university for a year. And after that, I got in a position in administration at university, and I've been there since the last 5 to 6 years around that.
Yeah.
I haven't gone out. Um, my plan is not to be in administration all my life.
Sure.
Um, but I want to go back to teaching at some point. But we'll see. We'll see what life brings me.
Yeah.
Yeah. Sometimes life brings you surprises, and you go to a different path.
It does. That's been my journey. Yeah, I couldn't have predicted that I'd be where I am right now. Even a couple of years ago, I couldn't have told you this is where I am. So yeah, life has those twists and turns into it. Makes it a fun adventure sometimes.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, so you're in addition then to doing all of your education and schooling, it seems like there was also kind of this parallel path that you started getting into creating some organizations and things that you're the founder of. Do you want to talk a little bit about some of that other work that it's clearer now to me, your cultural upbringing and the multicultural upbringing that is your story, why you've really started focusing some of what I'm assuming your passions are about multiculturalism and multilingual coordination amongst people. So what's going on with some of those? What are these other things that you're involved in, and what are the origin stories for? I think at least a couple of embracing culture and learn Comingo. And I know there's a magazine, other things coming out. There's some exciting stuff coming in your future. So what are some of the origin stories of how you got involved in these other multicultural aspects of life?
So, Learn Conmigo happened during the pandemic again. Um, I think it was the reason I missed so much the teaching of Spanish. So I started to learn Conmigo as a system. So basically, what I used to teach Spanish, individually speaking, to English speakers or French speakers through songs and Voxer. I used to send messages in Spanish and in translation in English. They would respond. Um, I would send also the vocal and they would respond in Spanish or in English, and I could
Mm,
help them with the process. I had an hour with the person teaching different things. Depending of the person, had individualized lessons with them. So everything was depending of what they needed. I would just teach them the Spanish. Um, So learn coming out happened because of that, and because I missed the teaching so much.
Yeah.
So I did that, and after that, actually, I used to have a podcast which was called Widely Confusing Brains, with a friend of mine. It was super interesting to do, but it was so time consuming. We
I'm
used to
familiar.
have the episodes in English and in French with the same guest. So it was different because
Oh,
all
wow.
of people had different responses depending of the language we actually had the podcast.
Yeah.
It was a fun thing to do. My friend is French from France. Her Spanish is a bit different than mine, and her English is different than mine. So it was interesting to see how we act and how we responded to things differently because of our culture background.
Sure.
We did that for about 6 months, something like that. It was great, but it was time consuming, so we stopped it. And
Yeah.
after that, embracing culture, it was because I started to realize how much culture was an impact in my life and how much every single project was going to the same root, culture.
Yes.
So I started to realize how much all of us if you think about, we all have different roots when it comes to culture and stuff like that. But people that are with different culture, born in different culture, we have things that we like, things that we don't like from the culture, and we can embrace the little imperfections, and we start to realize what things we want to do in our life. And for me, it was a bit of looking at imperfections and how to embrace those things in life, in business. So I created Embracing Culture, and the plan is to release a magazine actually extremely soon, talking about those little things as entrepreneurs, how we embrace those culture through life and our business. So to just show the diversity and also kind of bring awareness and education through that. So can people see kind of we're all different no matter what you're from. I'm Canadian, but at the same time, Canadian with roots, Mexican roots,
Of
Canadian with
course. Yeah.
Quebec roots. So I'm a bit different than most people are. So all of us have different roots and different backgrounds, and culture has a huge impact on our life and how we act and how we think. So it's a bit of awareness, education, and bring some also kind of, I don't know, some peace in some ways to people to realize kind of, yeah, you're different, but you're still great no matter
Right.
what.
Right.
Yeah.
Is there an example that you can point to? You'd mentioned about how like embracing I think you said other people's imperfections, I think is the word you used, but is there an example of, like, what does that mean to you in the context of embracing culture, and how can folks learn from your example and learn from what you're trying to share with the world?
So an example of that is kind of, for example, if I go to Mexico, I have struggled with the times people in Mexico have more kind of, they're more laid, they're more just relaxed, and they just don't feel like the pressure of the time as we do in Canada or the States, that we have kind of, yeah, everything is kind of a schedule, you have to follow it. And there's kind of, yeah, you say 8 o'clock, they might show up at 10 p.m. Kind of those
Sure.
little things, kind of, it's just little things like that that kind of a bit, I feel like, imperfect in some ways, because I don't really feel like I belong into that culture, but also don't believe in the Canadian culture because in a way, kind of, we're different.
Sure.
Um,
Sure.
if you think about time or just different little things like that, kind of, if we think about ahora could mean now, here, and
Right.
Mexico could mean when. Does it? We don't really know. Kind of those
Right.
little things is just embracing those little imperfections that sometimes we think that it's actually an imperfection. It's just we're just different.
Right.
Um,
Right.
so it's a bit of that for me. It's embracing those little things that could be different, but at the same time, it's just beautiful to see that.
Yeah. Yeah.
So kind of if a Mexican shows up here, if they say kind of 8 p.m., they might show up at 10 p.m.
Right.
So it all depends of what your education was. If you are aware of those little things, if you've been educated enough to know the culture, to say, you know what, that's what it is. This is Canadian culture. This is Mexican culture.
Right.
So I think it's more that I want to show that it's beautiful to have those little things and just embrace those little things that you think are imperfections that might not just imperfections. They're just different.
Yeah, I love that. I love, and thank you for that example. And what I'm interpreting is really openness,
Yeah,
is being open to it being whatever it is, it being done differently in a different culture, and being open to experiencing that, and not being so rigid that it well, this is the way I was raised, and this was a culture I grew up in, so everybody needs to do it this way. It's being open to how it's done in other places, and
yeah,
I love that. I think that's such an important aspect that I think does bring peace and harmony, that you're talking about, that can help people feel more comfortable. I've had the opportunity of wonderful, great opportunities in life to travel into different countries for work and sometimes for fun. But I think I've always found it incredibly important to learn about the culture that I'm going to. The
yeah.
times I've been to China or South Korea or India or Europe, different places that I've been fortunate enough to go to, and doing my best to understand how things are done there. And I've found in my travels, when I've made a mistake, that imperfection of not quite, doing it the way whatever it is done in that culture, I've found if you're trying, folks are much more open
Yeah,
to helping you along when they know, like, oh, you're not quite doing it the way we do it here, but you're trying.
exactly.
Yeah, so I appreciate I think what you're trying to teach people and educate people, but being open and trying to appreciate the way others see the world, and share how you do it, but also learn from others. So am I encapsulating that?
Exactly. That's
Good.
basically it. Yeah.
Yeah. So what's kind of the next steps for you in the embracing culture organization, and you think what's going on with that, and I think there's a launch coming up you mentioned soon.
So the goal is actually the magazine should be released in November. That's the goal, to release the magazine, and it's going to be different entrepreneurs from all over the world, talking about the culture and how they embrace it through the life, and different questions that sometimes we don't really think about. Um, so we can bring awareness to people and just embrace that culture that we have. For me, I'm Canadian Mexican, but a lot of them are from England with Indian roots,
Mm,
or something like that, or even
yeah.
England with kind of from English roots, but in the States, so different things like that. So it's going to be interesting to see that. So yeah, the magazine should be released in November. That's the goal. If everything goes well,
Yes,
if nothing
another.
changes.
Yeah.
Yeah, so that's the goal, and see people's reaction. People hopefully people will like it and will enjoy seeing that. But we'll see. You never know. You never know.
Yeah.
This
Is
hopefully the
the
reception will be good. Yeah.
yeah, absolutely. I can't wait to get a copy of it when it's out.
Yeah, it's gonna be
Is
all released online, so it's gonna be free copies. There's nothing. You don't have to pay anything. It's just gonna be released that way. Yeah, my social media platforms and my website, so everything's gonna be free copies, so you can do electronically.
wonderful. We'll make sure to put all that information up on the show notes of this, so that people can follow you and go get that information from you, and learn about what you're working on, and get the magazine then when it's released. Is it intended to be a kind of a one-time anthology, or is it a product that you hope will have a life and future issues, depending on what's the ambition and goals for the magazine?
So for now, the magazine is gonna be released on a monthly basis. No, actually no, a quarterly basis is a lot of
Quarterly
work.
base, okay, yeah, a little,
I
yeah.
was thinking, hold on 2 seconds.
Yeah,
No,
I was like,
quarterly
oh wow, that's ambitious.
No, no, no. On quarterly basis. The goal is also to have anthologies at some point. So it's not going to be a magazine, but also a book,
Wonderful.
and maybe a podcast.
Yeah.
But we'll see when the times comes. But yeah, it's kind of also I also want to do one-on-one consulting at some point. But we'll see. Right now, it's just for now. It's the magazine is the first step, and after that, we'll see what's the reception like, and if I should keep going that same path that I was thinking with the goals.
Wonderful. Well, so as you're getting ready to launch this, and what are some other tips or suggestions, or advice that you could provide to the listeners about embracing culture? I mean, we talked just a moment ago about openness and embracing those imperfections that happen when cultures mix. But what are some other things that people can learn from you and learn from your experience, that will hopefully make their walk through life more enjoyable and more integrated with other cultures?
I think it would become don't be shy. Sometimes we're too shy to show those little things about yourself, um, and just be yourself in the process of living. We all have different things and different culture and different communication, but also don't be shy and just be who you are and embrace that person that you are, because it's beautiful. I think it's just, yeah, don't be shy. Sometimes you never know what the reception of people will be. It might be a bad one, a good one, um, but this is who you are as a person. Embrace that person that you are.
Yeah. And
Does that make sense?
it does. I think that's I imagine sometimes easier said than done. Even in your story, you had to learn that lesson. It sounds like a hard way when you were in your early 20s learning English. Overcoming that shyness of not wanting to make a mistake or not saying the wrong thing or put the sentence in the wrong order or whatever. So it sounds like from personal experience, you've learned the significance of that lesson of overcoming shyness to put yourself out there and be yourself.
Yeah.
So I think that's a great lesson, and recognize that it's sometimes that can be hard.
Yeah, and it's harder. It's harder to be done than be said.
Yeah, absolutely. So it sounds like to me, that connection and that support of other folks in this process is something that's also important. You'd mentioned in your story, you felt alone for a period of time there when you were making that transition. I'm the story I'm telling in my head, that as folks are maybe moving through different cultures, still having a sense of belonging with folks that you can communicate with, and maybe do have some connection to your culture of origin is also an important process. So it's this blending with new cultures while staying connected to maybe your culture of origin. Does that story have any validity that I'm kind of telling myself, as far as what might have made your transition a little bit easier, and not feeling so alone?
Yeah, I think for me, the fact that my parents are always extremely proud and extremely kind of focused on the fact that I cannot lose my culture, was extremely helpful through my process of just enjoying that side of me.
Yeah.
I still, even though I'm Mexican, I still cannot dance. There's things that I cannot do as a Mexican, which I'm aware of. There's things I want to improve and learn, that's for sure.
Yeah.
But kind of the fact that my parents were also kind of extremely kind of proud and just learn for me to teach, kind of to learn how can I say it, but for them to teach me this kind of my Mexican rules and still can be proud of it and don't
Yeah.
never lose that.
Yeah.
There's some parents that just rather just don't teach them Spanish, or can be rather just have that part of themselves removed. For me, my parents was the opposite. Um, so in a way, one of the reasons I went to do a master's in Spanish was because I wanted to improve my Spanish.
Yeah.
um,
Yeah.
and yeah, so I'm lucky that I always been connected to my roots in some ways. Kind of the Spanish masters in Spanish was extremely beautiful to have that, because I could see I have other colleagues that was they were Spanish from Spain, Cuba. There was a lot of different cultures in that process too. So it was interesting to see that, and I'm lucky that I had I'm lucky I always had good friends
Yeah,
um,
good.
from different backgrounds, kind of, and the fact that people were receptive to who I am as a person was extremely helpful to the process of learning different languages. Even in the communications degree, um, this was people that was just kind of interested in me. So it was easier for me than other people in some ways, because I had friends and support system. The professors were great to help me through the process. So yeah, I'm extremely grateful and lucky that I have those people in my life. They've been there all the way through the process. So it's kind of, yeah, I'm grateful that my parents they always insisted on keeping that culture in me. Not everyone has that same chance that I had.
Yeah.
So yeah, kind of in a way, I'm grateful, and it's one of the reasons why this is this now. So yeah,
Yeah. I think that is so important, and I'm grateful to hear of your parents' support and their ties to their Mexican heritage and culture. I mean, I think that's such an important thing. You know, again, growing up in San Antonio in the '80s, you know, having a lot of Hispanic friends with Mexican heritage. Um, I didn't know many who spoke Spanish in the home, because there was a move in the 60s and 70s
yeah,
and 80s in sadly probably everywhere, but certainly in the San Antonio area, where um, and probably going back even further than the 1960s, but certainly in the kind of the generational eras that I was brought up in, there was sadly a push to kind of hide that
yeah,
heritage and only speak English. So I knew many of my friends who grew up with Mexican heritage, a generation or two removed, they no longer spoke Spanish. They no longer had those connections to their Mexican heritage, and I find that sad, and I think there's been a change going on, and a good change going on, where we're recognizing that life doesn't have to be so homogenized and siloed that you're either you know Mexican or you're American or you're Canadian or you're Mexican. We're complex enough creatures that we can hold multiple things at the same time. So maintaining your Mexican heritage and your Canadian heritage in both hands, simultaneously, I think is beautiful. And I'm grateful to hear your story, and I hope more people are doing that as well, because I think it's important,
it is
and
important. I think it's also kind of in a way. Obviously, our roots are kind of, has different roots and different backgrounds, but those little things aren't matters at the end of the day. Kind of, if you think about it. Uh,
yeah,
yeah. So for me, I'm lucky. I'm really lucky. Kind of, yeah. I don't know. I don't know how I can explain this, but I just feel lucky.
yeah. Well, from the outside looking in, I see that you are. I mean, I think it's great. I think it's great that you've maintained that multiculturalism. It's so important.
And if it can, it's funny because at home now with my brother and I, actually we always speak French instead of Spanish for some reason.
Nice.
Um, we switch into Spanish when we are surrounded by my parents most of the time. But
Sure.
it's strange that we always at home we do a mix of French and Spanish at home. Even though my parents we always speak Spanish to them.
Yeah.
But it's sometimes I realize with time that everyone that's first generation of something, they always do a mix of the languages they are brought in with the language of the society. Um,
Yeah.
but it's kind of, if I hear my brother now, we just speak French for some reason, even though our first language is Spanish in some ways. Um,
Yeah.
but it's strange to think about it sometimes. We kind of, I don't really think about it now. It's kind of, hey, why am I speaking French now with my brother? But it's something I think it's something that happens a lot with first generation siblings. Um,
Sure.
because we are so much surrounded by the language of society that we do a mix now,
Yeah, it makes sense.
which is code switching. But it's interesting to see that in our relationship. Um, and I think everyone can relate to that. A lot of people can relate to that
Yeah,
when it comes to,
yeah, that makes a lot of sense. What language do you dream in? Just curious.
It depends how I
Yeah.
feel. A lot of times I feel like I dream more in French, um,
Yeah.
because I'm surrounded by it so much.
Yeah.
But I don't really know. I don't really think about my dreams anymore.
Yeah.
But when it comes, if we talk about feelings, I go more to Spanish. If I
Okay.
think
Yeah.
about religion, Spanish. Um,
Yeah.
if I go into different education, nowadays I would say English.
Yeah.
Um, if I think friendship, French. So it depends of what field I'm in.
Yeah.
It goes into waves.
Yeah. I I think, the feelings, emotions, and religion. I mean, that's those kind of powerful emotional connections that we have. It's interesting. Then you do kind of. It sounds like you revert to the original language that was talked in your home, and that makes a whole lot of sense. That those ties are deep in your psyche and
Yeah.
in your body and brain connection. That when you're talking about those deep things, you kind of revert back to Spanish. That's interesting.
Yeah, it's interesting, and even more since I'm a young age, I've always been to the French church.
Mm,
Um, so it's interesting how I relate religion, even though in Spanish for some reason.
yeah, that
I
is
still
fascinating.
I know all my prayers in French and in Spanish, but I just feel like it's strange. I always go back to Spanish as a root when it comes to religion. But also, I
Yeah.
think it's also because the Quebec culture it's not extremely religious in general.
Mm,
Um,
okay.
so usually they're not as religious as Mexicans. So I think that's also the reason why I go to
Sure.
Spanish.
Yeah.
But I go to church I used to go to church every single Sunday with my family in French because I'm from a small town.
Yeah.
Um, so yeah, so yeah,
Those connections. That's just fascinating. How we evolve as humans. But that makes sense to me.
yeah,
Those deep connections are connected to your cultural heritage of origin. So, well, let me ask you a question, and I know you're not a U.S. citizen, so this is you know involving you in international relations.
okay.
um,
I'm scared now.
yeah, well, I'm really grateful for you and having this conversation about embracing culture right now. In the United States right now, it's campaign season, and there's a lot of ugliness, um, particularly from one side of the campaigning, particularly when it comes around immigration and a tremendous amount of ugliness and harshness and lies and just some really horrible things are being said, and those things that are being said have real world
Yeah,
consequences to people, and that's why the timing of this episode is wonderful from my perspective, because embracing culture is so important, and we're dealing with that in the United States right now. We're having uh, maybe a long overdue national conversation because of the political atmosphere about culture and about immigration and about embracing differences, seeing the similarities in our humanity but embracing the differences in how we live our lives. um Again, you're not involved in US politics, but do you have any sense of some of these right wing movements? And it's not just in the United States. I mean, there's some right wing things happening in Europe, um, anti-immigration sentiment and politics happening in other places. I'm assuming it's there in Canada as well. That you're not um, immune
yeah,
from that far right ugliness when it comes to uh, dividing people instead of bringing people together. What's your sense of that, because it seems like your mission, embracing culture, is the antidote to that. It's confronting that ugliness and talking about the beauty of those differences, those imperfections, and encouraging people to be open and embrace those differences, as opposed to shun them and be afraid of them and demonize them. So is the, I guess the question here is, some of the ugliness that we're experiencing here in the United States, is it crossing the border into Canada? And are you guys dealing with similar conversations around immigration and cultural differences, that this is what it means to be a Canadian, and if you're not that, then you don't belong here? And is there stuff like that happening where you are? Because it is happening here, and it's sad and it's dangerous.
Yeah, the United States always has an impact in Canada because we're extremely close. So there's reasons why it's always if something happens in the States, it goes to here.
Yeah.
But in a way, Canadians usually are more into multiculturalism. They're more open in some ways. So it has an impact, but I don't think it has so much as an impact in this in the States. It seems more present and more intense than here. It depends which city you're into. So I don't really have a comment about it. The only thing I could say, Canadians are more open when it comes to cultures in general, because we're so mixed in some ways. So it has an impact, but I don't think it has so much as an impact as in the States. So, and we also have a different system in general. So I cannot really comment on it, to be honest. And I think it's sad to see that side of things that are happening in the States, but it might have an impact in Canada, but not as much as it does over there.
Yeah. Well, good. I'm glad we're not exporting some of our hateful rhetoric.
There might be some hate somewhere. I'm just not surrounded by it.
Yeah, good. Good.
And I don't know. I think everyone has a different experience when it comes to race and culture in the city. And for me, I never to be honest, I think all my friends are more into embracing culture. So I think it's more everyone has a different experience when it comes to hate and culture in the city. But for us, I don't know, Canadians in general are more into embracing culture. In general. It's a multicultural country too. So in a way, it's a bit different. And usually it's, I cannot really say how much it has an impact on us. But obviously always when something happens in the States, since we're extremely close, it always has an impact on us for some reason.
Well, the thing I know is kind of a maybe a weird curveball of a question, but it is so prevalent happening right now in
it's extremely important, since politics has been always has an impact on our life, no matter what.
Right.
And it's important to mention, and even more in this time that we live in. It has an impact more to Americans than anything else, because you actually live there. So, but in a way, I don't really know how much an impact it has here. I don't really see it, but maybe I'm not surrounded in the right space neither. So I'm not sure.
Sure. Well, I think your message of embracing culture is incredibly relevant all the time, but certainly in the time that we're living now in the States, where there's so much heightened discussion about it, and so much of the discussion is like I said, it is just ugly. So I'm really grateful for your time today to share with us the significance and the beauty that comes from embracing culture and embracing people's imperfections. Just because they're different, that's okay. Just because things are not exactly the way you were raised, that's okay. That there's enough that brings us together, enough that makes us similar, that we should embrace those differences with openness and love. So your message is, I think, incredibly timely and incredibly important. So
Yeah, I always think of everyone has a different perspective on it. There's things about the culture, Canadian culture, I don't like. There's things I don't like about the Mexican culture, but everyone has a different perspective and different opinion on it.
Right.
But yeah, it's just embracing those little things that really matters at the end of the day. It's not like I'm not gonna say, yeah. It's just embracing those little things and just see, okay, this is who I am. This is what I like. This is what I don't like. But
Yeah.
it's embracing those little things that matters at the end of the day, because it has an impact on how you live and how you act and react to situations.
Yeah. Wonderful. Well, Kassandra, what can folks do to support you? What can they, what's your call to action after listening to this conversation? If people are inspired to embrace culture and learn more and get involved, what's your call to action for folks to support your work or just in general learn from your life experience?
So for me, it's kind of people can follow me on Instagram, Embracing Culture. Everything is under Embracing Culture with a K.
Yeah.
Because of Cassandra, it makes sense. Whatever. Embracing Culture
Marketing.
on Facebook, Instagram, and there's also a website. So people will be able to see the magazine through there, through every single platform. But also my message would be is just kind of be open. Be open. It's just there's nothing wrong with being open. You might not like it, but at least you're aware of it.
Yeah. Wonderful. Yeah. Well, I'll put on again the show notes, your website, and links to all of your socials as well. So I end each episode asking everybody the same 3 questions.
Okay.
So got 3 more questions for you before we let you go. We talk about hard subjects sometimes on the show, and we're just a moment ago talking about the ugliness of hate and the rhetoric that can surround that. So I'd like to end the show talking about hope.
Okay.
And really looking at hope from the perspective of how it's defined by those who study emotions and study those types of things. Hope being defined as you can have a vision for a better future, and you feel like you have some personal agency to help that vision become reality.
Yeah.
Doesn't mean it's going to be easy. Doesn't mean you're not going to have failures along the way. Doesn't mean you might not make it to that vision, but you have a vision and you feel like you have some ability to affect getting there to that vision. So I got 3 quick questions for you about your hope. And so just answer, kind of top of mind, your first thought. Doesn't just kind of want to kind of do quick rapid fire questions with you. So you ready to talk about hope?
Yeah.
All right. First question, Kassandra. What is your vision for a better future? It can be your vision for personally, professionally, or for the world. What's your vision for a better future?
Get people educated. I think it's more education has a huge impact. So knowledge is power, as we all know. So I think it's kind of, just educate yourself, and hopefully people will be more receptive and open.
Okay. So why is that important? You just kind of touched on it, but we want to expand on why is that important?
Because it's gonna decrease a bit of the hate, and also it's gonna bring more peace in general. I think that's my personal opinion, obviously. But yeah, I think that's why I'm more into education and bring awareness, so people can be less hateful in some ways. And just realize, God, we're just different. There's nothing wrong with being different.
Perfect. So last question. Imagine we're living in that future where people are more educated, and as a result, they're more open, and there's been a decrease of hate and misunderstandings because of being more educated. So we're living there in that future. How do you feel now?
I think I'll feel better. I think that's gonna be more feel better. I don't know how to respond to that question. Just thinking feel better. The fact that I can just bring a bit of peace in some ways through my mission and stuff like that, I think I feel better knowing the fact that I did whatever I could to make it happen.
Nice. Well, Kassandra, thank you so much for joining me today on Stories Sustain Us, and I'm going to do my part to help your vision for a better future come to pass. I'm going to continue to educate myself and be open to other cultures and other people and other differences, and putting this episode out will hopefully help educate others as well, supporting your vision and your mission. So I'll give you the last word. Is there anything else you'd like to say before we sign off today?
Thank you for inviting me, and thank you for creating this podcast. I think it's going to have a huge impact on people's life, and hopefully people will listen and just enjoy the moment that we have together. And yeah, it's great. I'm really happy to be part of it, and extremely grateful that you invited me to be part of it. Yeah.
Wonderful. Well, thank you, Kassandra, for your time. Look forward to the magazine coming out soon, and look forward to continuing seeing you do wonderful things, making the world a better place. So thank you for joining me, and we'll stay in touch. Take care.
Take care.
All right. Bye-bye. And that brings us to the end of another inspiring episode of Stories Sustain Us. A huge thank you to Kassandra Ayala-Najera for sharing her incredible journey with us today. Her story as a first-generation Mexican-Canadian growing up near Quebec and navigating a multicultural upbringing truly reminds us of the power of embracing cultural differences. Kassandra's passion for language education and her dedication to promoting multiculturalism through initiatives like Embracing Culture and Learn Conmigo are nothing short of inspiring to me. Her reflections on the challenges she's faced, as well as her advocacy for openness and understanding in today's complex political climate, offer a hopeful vision for a future where education fosters acceptance and reduces hate. I want to thank Kassandra for how she handled the curveball I threw at her. These conversations are just that. They're conversations. I don't script the questions that I'm going to ask my guests, other than the 3 questions about hope at the very end. Everything else is just me kind of getting to know my guest and talking with them about their work. And as I was speaking with Kassandra about what I think is the amazing work she's doing, encouraging people to embrace cultural differences, and really find those similarities as well, it struck me the political tone that's happening here in the United States during this campaign, and certainly happening in other areas of the world. And I'm thinking of some European countries where far right nationalism is kind of rearing up, as it is here in the United States as well. And I really appreciate how she definitely navigated that question about American politics influencing Canada. But it's an important thing that she's doing. I think this idea of talking about the significance of multiculturalism and being able to speak different languages and interact with different cultures in a healthy way. The language that is being used in this campaign cycle is not healthy, and it's not helpful, and in fact it can be actually incredibly dangerous when someone, a leader, someone who wants to be a leader, is using language of division and language of hate and lying about other people, whether it's an immigrant or someone of a different race or skin color or a different religion. Those are really ugly political tactics to gain power. That's the language of someone who doesn't want to solve problems. That's someone who's not trying to figure out how to deal with an important issue. Immigration is an important issue, but when you're just making up stories and saying ugly, awful things about the immigrant, that's someone who isn't actually trying to solve the important issue of immigration. That's someone who's just trying to gain power, and specifically power over you, power over others. It's an old tactic. It's a tactic that's been used probably since humans figured out how to use it. Certainly for centuries at least, this idea of demonizing the other, generating anger and fear amongst a base of people so that you can secure power. It's happening now in this political cycle, and it's incredibly frustrating and difficult to watch. Which is why I'm so moved by the work of Kassandra and how she is really speaking to a vision of where people can get along, where cultures can remain true to their identities, but also mix and embrace others. And that is such an important message to me at this time when there are these really amplified, angry, hateful, lying messages that are damaging and dangerous. So again, I thank Kassandra for how she handled that curveball I threw at her. I didn't necessarily mean to bring American politics into her Canadian life, but it's an important issue going on, and I appreciate the work that she's doing to counterbalance some of the ugliness that's out there right now. So with that, allow me once again to thank Kassandra for sharing her wisdom and for showing us how embracing unique identities can pave the way for a more inclusive world. To all you listening and watching, I hope today's conversation has sparked new perspectives on how we can support and celebrate the rich diversity that's all around us. As always, if you enjoyed this episode, please subscribe, rate, and review Stories Sustain Us on your favorite podcast platform. More than that, please share this episode with your friends and family. Text someone you know the episode link and encourage them to check it out, or just pass it on to someone that you're talking with. Just help spread the word, because your help spreading the word about Stories Sustain Us is incredibly valuable. I really appreciate your support, so thank you. Now, next week's episode of Stories Sustain Us, I have a really fun conversation with a fisheries research biologist that has worked in the areas of sustainable fisheries management and the conservation of native fish populations. She was one of the founding partners of the Fisheries Conservation Foundation, where she now serves as the director of operations. And she has worked extensively with international partners assessing the developmental impacts on rivers. Her work now focuses on effective ways to share science-based research so decisions can be made for the long-term health of aquatic ecosystems. I really enjoyed this conversation, and I'm sure you will too. It'll be available on October 22nd at storiessustainus.com, wherever you listen to podcasts, and on YouTube. So please be sure to tell someone about Stories Sustain Us, and join me next week for another inspiring story contributing to a more sustainable world. Until next time, I'm Stephen Shower. Please take care of yourself and each other. Take care.